The woman walked up to me like we already knew each other, smiling. Familiar. She said, "You must be her son." I nodded. She looked back at my mother across the room, then back at me, and said, "I used to work the overnight shifts with her." That didn't make sense. My mother never worked nights. At least, not in the life I remembered. I told her that. She smiled slightly, not correcting me, just surprised. "Oh," she said, "you didn't know." And in that moment, standing in the middle of my mother's retirement party, I realized something that didn't fit anywhere. There was a whole version of her life that I had never seen at all. Before I tell you what that woman said to me, I need to explain what my mother was like when I was growing up, because the revelation only mattered because of who she had always been. We never had much. That part was obvious. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the kind of way that announces itself while you're living it. Just modest. A small house. An older car. Bills handled carefully. Clothes that lasted longer than they should have. Groceries bought with attention. Nothing wasted. Nothing excessive. At the time, I thought that was just our life. Not difficult. Not easy. Just normal. My mother made it feel that way. That was one of her gifts. She never framed anything as struggle. Never used words like burden. Never let the atmosphere in the house feel heavier than it had to. She was tired a lot. I knew that. But tiredness, to me as a kid, just looked like adulthood. She was always moving. Always doing one more thing before sitting down. Laundry. Dinner. School forms. Phone calls. Something being packed. Something being cleaned. Something being handled before I even knew it needed handling. That was her style. Quiet efficiency. She didn't narrate effort. She just absorbed it. If something broke, she found a way. If money got tight, which I understand now was probably off, and she adjusted something without making us feel the full shape of it. That was the part one didn't see clearly until much later. Not the existence of limits. The skill with which she hid them. She was always there when it counted. That is what stays with me most. School events. Parent meetings. Doctor appointments. The visible things. The practical things. She never missed what she could possibly make. And when she couldn't, she had a reason that sounded ordinary enough not to question. "I have to cover something. I'll be there after. We'll do it tomorrow." At the time, all of that made sense. Now I hear those sentences differently. We live in a house where everything was stretched, but never visibly torn. That was because of her, though I didn't know the scale of it then. I remember her coming home late sometimes, still smiling, still asking how school was, still making food if there wasn't anything ready, still checking whether I had done whatever needed to be done for the next day. That part feels almost impossible to me now. Not emotionally. Practically, I know what one job takes out of a person. I know what one hard week can do. And yet my memory of her is not someone collapsing under life. It is someone managing it so completely that the people around her mistook that management for ease. That was probably the greatest thing she ever did for us. She removed the panic. Kids do not need full financial truth. They feel atmosphere first. And my mother was very good at controlling atmosphere. If she was worried, it stayed inside her. If she was exhausted, it appeared only in brief moments. A hand resting on the kitchen counter a little longer than usual. A pause before standing back up. A cup of coffee reheated instead of replaced. Small details. That was all I saw. I never heard her complain. I need to say that clearly. Not once. Not in the way some people do when life becomes too much. She did not sit us down and talk about sacrifice. She did not collect sympathy in advance. She did not build herself into the center of every difficulty. She just kept going. That was her language. As I got older, I started helping where I could. Not because she asked, because it seemed obvious. I got part-time work when I was old enough. Paid for my own things when I could. Try not to add pressure where I didn't need to. But even then, my understanding was limited. I thought I was helping in a tight household. I did not understand I was helping someone who had already been carrying more than I could see for years. She was private about money. Not secretive, just contained. You could ask if something was all right, and she would say yes in a tone that made further questions feel unnecessary. It's fine. That was one of her phrases, and she said it in a way that closed the subject without making you feel shut out. That takes skill. Looking back, that phrase covered more ground than I knew. Late notices, missing sleep, extra work, physical exhaustion, probably fear too, though I never saw that part directly. She kept dignity in the room. That mattered to her. Not pride in the loud sense. Not performance. Just a refusal to let hardship become the main character of our lives. There were signs, of course. I can see them now. Shoes by the back door that changed depending on the day. A jacket she wore only sometimes. Calls taken in a lower voice in the kitchen. Periods during school holidays when she seemed to leave at unusual times. Come home at odd ones too. I noticed all of that then. I just didn't know how to interpret it. Children are good at seeing patterns. They're not always good at naming them. And when the adult creating those patterns is doing everything possible to protect you from the meaning, you usually accept the version that asks the least of you. So I did. I accepted the visible life, not the hidden math underneath it. As an adult, I built my own career. Did well enough. Better than she ever gave herself permission to expect. And when I could help her, I did. Quietly. The same way she had always done things. Paid for repairs she would have delayed. Covered things she would have said could wait. Sent money in ways that let her keep her footing. She never fully accepted it. That was another one of her habits. She would say, "You don't need to do that," even when she clearly needed someone to. I learned to ignore that sentence gently. Not disrespectfully, just with accuracy. By then, I thought I understood her. Maybe not completely, but enough. A woman who had worked hard, managed carefully, raised us without complaint. I knew she had done a lot. I just thought I knew the shape of it. That was my mistake. Not underestimating her character. Underestimating the scale. When her retirement party came around, I was genuinely happy for her. That was the feeling I walked in with. Pride. Relief. Something close to gratitude, though I would not have used that word yet. There were colleagues there. Neighbors. People from different parts of her life. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. The room was warm. A little crowded. Everyone telling stories about how dependable she had been. How long she had been there. How much people leaned on her. All of that fit. All of that made sense. I moved through the room smiling. Shaking hands. Hearing versions of the same thing. She never missed a shift. She always knew how to handle people. She was the one everyone trusted. She said it like it was obvious. Like it was something I had always known. I used to work the overnight shifts with her. I looked at her. Not confused at first. Just waiting for the part where it made sense. My mother didn't work nights, I said. Not defensive. Just correcting what felt like a mistake. The woman smiled slightly. Not dismissing me. Just adjusting. "Oh," she said. "You didn't know." That was the moment everything shifted. Not when she spoke. When she assumed, I already understood. "What do you mean?" I asked. She glanced back at my mother. Across the room. Talking to someone. Smiling. Then back at me. She used to come in after her evening job, she said. Stay through the night. Then leave just before morning. I didn't respond right away. Because the sentence didn't land cleanly. It didn't attach to anything I recognized. "She worked nights?" I said. The woman nodded. "For years," she said. Then added, "She never talked about you kids during those shifts." That caught my attention. "Why not?" I asked. The woman shrugged lightly. She said she didn't want you to feel it. Feel it. That word stayed there. Not explained, but heavy. I looked past her again. And my mother. Still smiling. Still present. Still exactly the person I thought I knew. And something inside me started to move. Not fast. Just quietly. "How long?" I asked. The woman thought for a second. "Most of the time I was there," she said. 5, maybe 6 years. 5 or 6 years. That wasn't occasional. That was a system. A schedule. A second life. And I had no memory of it. None. "What kind of work was it?" I asked. "Cleaning," she said. "Offices. Buildings. Nothing glamorous." She smiled again. But she never complained. Of course she didn't. That part made perfect sense. The rest didn't. And weekends, the woman added. She had another job then. That stopped me. Another one? I said. She nodded. Retail, mostly, she said. Covered shifts for people. Picked up whatever was available. I felt something shift more clearly now. Not confusion anymore. Recognition. Not of what she was saying. Of what I had missed. There had been times when my mother wasn't there. Times that had explanations. I have to cover something. I'll be late. We'll do it tomorrow. I had accepted all of those. Never questioned them. Because they sounded ordinary. Because she made them sound ordinary. How did she manage that? I asked. The woman let out a small breath. I don't know, she said. She just did. She'd come in tired sometimes. But never late. Never unfocused. She always finished everything. I nodded slowly. That part one could see. That was exactly who she was. And during school holidays, the woman continued. She picked up extra shifts. Different places. Wherever they needed someone. 3 jobs. Overnight. Weekends. Holidays. And I had known none of it. Not the structure. Not the scale. Just the surface. The woman looked at me more carefully now. You really didn't know, she said. It wasn't a question. Just confirmation. I shook my head. No, I said. She nodded slowly. She was very particular about that, she said. Never wanted it to show. That's why I assumed. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Because the assumption was obvious. That I had grown up understanding what she had done. That I had seen it. That I had known. I hadn't. Not even close. I looked down at my hands for a second. Then back up. Did she ever talk about why? I asked. The woman thought for a moment. Then she said kids don't need to carry adult weight. That was it. No explanation beyond that. No justification. Just a principle. And suddenly, everything I remembered started to rearrange itself. The tiredness. The late arrivals. The small pauses I had noticed, but never understood. They weren't random. They were contained. Structured. Managed. Just like everything else she did. Except this time, the scale was something I had never been allowed to see. The woman touched my arm lightly. She was one of the hardest working people I've ever met, she said. Then added, and she never let it change how she treated anyone. I nodded, because that part didn't surprise me at all. What surprised me was how much of her life had existed outside of what I thought I knew. The woman smiled once more, then said, You should be proud of her, and walked away, just like that. Left me standing there, in the middle of a room full of people celebrating my mother, with a version of her in my mind that no longer matched what I was seeing. I looked across the room again. Found her. Same place. Same posture. Talking. Listening. Smiling. Exactly as she always had. But now, there was something else layered into it. Something I couldn't unsee. And as I stood there, trying to place it, try to understand how much I had missed, I realized something clearly. I hadn't just underestimated how hard she worked. I had underestimated how much she had chosen to hide from me. And I didn't know yet whether that realization was going to feel heavy or something else entirely. I didn't go to her right away. That surprised me. I thought I would. Walk straight across the room. Ask her about it. But I didn't. I stayed where I was. Because I needed a second to understand what I had just been given. Not information. Perspective. I watched her from a distance. Same posture. Same rhythm. Listening to someone. Nodding at the right moments. Exactly the way she had always been. And now I could see something underneath it. Not visible, but present. Every time she leaned slightly on the table. Every time she adjusted her stance before turning to someone else. Small things. The kind of things you only notice when you already know there's more behind them. I thought about mornings. School days. Times she had woken me up. Made breakfast. Moved through the kitchen like it was the start of a normal day. Not the continuation of something that had already taken everything out of her. I thought about nights. When she wasn't there. The explanations that had felt complete. I have to cover something. I'll be back later. I had accepted those without hesitation. Because she made them sound like part of life. not the edges of something much bigger. There was no gap in my memory. That was the strangest part. No obvious absence. No moment where I felt like something was missing. She had filled every space, even the ones she wasn't physically in. That takes more than effort. That takes design. I realized then that this wasn't just about working multiple jobs. It was about how carefully she had constructed our experience of it, so that we would feel stable, even when she wasn't. I moved slowly through the room, not toward her, just around, listening differently now, hearing people talk about her. She never said no to a shift. She always picked up the slack. She was the one we relied on. Each sentence landed differently, not as compliments, as confirmations, pieces of something that had always been visible to others, just not to me. That wasn't their fault. They saw her in a different context, at a different time of day, in a version of her life I had never entered. I stopped near a group of people I didn't recognize. They were talking about her the same way. She would finish a year and go straight to another job. One of them said, "Never complained." Another nodded. I don't think she ever wanted anyone to feel sorry for her. That part hit differently, not because it was new, because it matched everything I knew about her. She didn't allow pity into her life, not as a principle, as a habit. I stepped away from that group, needed a moment where no one was talking about her, where I could just think. I found a quiet corner, not completely empty, just less crowded. And for the first time since that woman had spoken to me, I let the full picture start to form. 3 jobs, overnight shifts, weekend work, extra hours during holidays, and still, school events, doctor visits, dinner on the table, presents, consistency, no complaints, no visible strain, no sense, as a child, that something was off. That wasn't accidental. That was the result of decisions, repeated, daily, a choice to carry more than she needed to share, so that I wouldn't feel it. I thought about all the times I had heard her say, "It's fine," how easily I had accepted that, how completely I had believed it. And now I understood what that phrase had been doing. Not describing reality, managing it. For me, there was a shift in how I saw my own life, too. The things I had built, the work I had done. I had always thought of it as something separate, my own effort, my own path. But now, it didn't feel separate. It felt connected, built on something I hadn't fully acknowledged. Not just support, sacrifice, structured, sustained, invisible. I looked across the room again, found her, still talking, still smiling, still the same, and not the same at all. That was the strange part. Nothing about her had changed in that moment. The change was entirely in me, in what I understood, in what I could no longer ignore. I felt something then, not overwhelming, not dramatic, just steady, a kind of clarity, not about what to say, about what mattered. I didn't need to ask her about it. Not there, not like that, because whatever she had done it deliberately, and whatever she had chosen not to say was part of that same intention. This wasn't something to expose. It was something to recognize. That was the difference. I took a breath, then started walking toward her. Not quickly, just directly. And as I moved through the room, past people still telling stories about her, past conversations that now felt incomplete in a new way, I realized something clearly. I wasn't walking toward her to understand her better. I was walking toward her because I finally did. And I didn't need words to show that. I just needed to stand next to her, the way she had always stood next to me, without making a moment, without asking for anything in return. Just there. That was enough. And for the first time in my life, I understood what she had been doing all along. I didn't say anything when I reached her. That was the first decision. She was mid-conversation, talking to someone from work, explaining something the way she always did. Clear, calm. I stepped beside her, close enough that she noticed, not interrupting, just there. She glanced at me briefly, a small smile, the kind she always gave when she saw me across a room. Then she finished her sentence, turned slightly toward me. "Everything all right?" she asked. Same question, same tone, the one she had asked my entire life. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. And then, without thinking about it too much, I reached for her hand. Not dramatically, just held it. She looked at me, not confused, just noticing, because that wasn't something I did often. Not in public. Not like that. I didn't explain it. Didn't tell her what I had just learned. Didn't mention the woman, the shifts, the years. None of it. Because in that moment, it didn't feel like something she needed to hear. It felt like something I needed to acknowledge. Silently. She held my hand back. Gently. Not asking anything. Not pulling away. Just accepting it. That was her way. If something didn't need to be made into a conversation, she didn't make it one. We stood like that for a while. People came up, said things, congratulated her, told stories I had already started hearing differently. She never missed a shift. She always showed up. I heard those sentences again, but now they carried weight. Not abstract, specific. Every word connected to something I could finally see. At one point, someone said, "I don't know how you did it all those years." She smiled. That same small smile. The one that closed the subject without dismissing it. "You just do what needs to be done," she said. That was it. No elaboration. No detail. Just the principle. And I understood now how much was inside that sentence. Not just effort. Choice. Repeated. Quietly. Over years. Without audience. Without acknowledgement. I stayed beside her the entire evening. Not because she needed me there. Because I needed to be. There were moments where she would move slightly, turn to speak to someone else, and my hand would fall away, then return again when she came back. Not deliberate, just natural, like something had shifted into place. Toward the end of the night, the room started to thin out. People leaving in small groups. Goodbyes, hugs, promises to stay in touch. The usual rhythm. She thanked everyone, the same way she always did. Direct, sincere. Not extended. No long speeches. No need to hold attention. When most of the room had cleared, she finally looked at me more directly. "You've been quiet tonight," she said. Not accusing. Just observing. "I've been listening," I said. She nodded. "That's good," she said. Then added, "There's a lot to listen to in a room like this." I almost smiled, because that was exactly what she would say. And for a second, I thought about telling her. About the woman. About what I had learned. About the nights. The weekends. All of it. But something stopped me. Not hesitation. Understanding. She hadn't told me then for a reason. And telling her that I knew now wouldn't change what she had already chosen. It would just shift the balance. Turn something she had carried quietly into something we both had to speak about. And I wasn't sure that was what she wanted. Or needed. So I didn't. Instead, I said something else. "I'm proud of you," I said. Simple. Direct. She looked at me. Really looked. Not the quick glance she gave everyone else. Something slower. Then she nodded. "Thank you," she said. That was all. No expansion. No deflection. Just accepted. And in that moment, I realized something. She didn't need recognition for what she had done. Not in the way people usually do. She had already made peace with it. Already placed it where it belonged in her own life. What mattered now was that I had seen it, that I understood it, without needing her to explain it, without asking her to relive it. That was the respect she had always given me, not making me carry things I didn't need to. And now, I could give that back to her. The last few people left. The room quieted. The noise settled into something softer. She started clearing things. Automatically. Picking up plates, stacking glasses. Even now, even on a night meant for her, that instinct hadn't changed. I stepped in, took a few things from her hands. She didn't argue, didn't say it's fine. She just let me. That was new, subtle, but new. We worked side by side for a few minutes. No conversation, just movement. Familiar, comfortable. And as we stood there, quietly putting things back in order, I realized something clearly. This wasn't the moment where everything changed. It was the moment where I finally caught up to what had always been true. And for the first time, I wasn't just her child in that room. I was someone who could see her. Completely. Or at least more completely than I ever had before. And that changed how everything after this night was going to feel. I didn't bring it up the next day, or the day after that. That was intentional, not because I was avoiding it, because I understood something now. If she had wanted me to know, she would have told me. And if she had chosen not to, that choice deserved the same respect as everything else she had done. So I didn't ask, but I didn't forget either. That would have been the easier mistake. To treat it as something revealed, then slowly return to the version of her I had before. I couldn't do that anymore. Once you see something like that, you don't unsee it. It doesn't disappear. It integrates. I started noticing things differently. Not new things, old things, reinterpreted. The way she moved through her day. The way she still did small tasks before sitting down. The way she still paused slightly before saying, "It's fine." Now I heard that pause, not as hesitation, as habit. A habit built over years of managing more than she ever said out loud. I also noticed something else. She was slower now. Not dramatically, but enough. A step that took a second longer. A hand resting on the counter just a little more often. A chair pulled out earlier in the evening than before. That mattered, because for the first time, there was no next shift, no second job, no third one waiting in the background. Just space. And she didn't quite know what to do with it. That was new. A life that had been structured around necessity suddenly didn't have the same demands. And when something like that disappears, it leaves a gap. Not empty, just unfamiliar. I started filling that gap in small ways. Not as a plan, not as a statement, just gradually. I took care of things before she could. Repairs, bills, anything that would have required her to stretch herself again. I didn't announce it, didn't frame it as help, because help suggests imbalance. And she had never allowed that word into her life. So I made it invisible, the same way she had. If something was paid, it was just handled. If something was fixed, it was just done. If something needed attention, it had already been taken care of by the time she noticed. That was the only way it would work. Because if I made it visible, she would push back, not out of pride, out of habit. A lifetime of managing things alone doesn't disappear because someone offers to carry part of it. You have to remove the weight before it becomes a decision. That was what she had done for me. Now I was doing it for her. Quietly. One evening, a few weeks after the retirement party, I stopped by her house. No reason. Just to see her. She was in the kitchen. Same place she had always been. Standing near the counter. Looking at something she had written down. She looked up when I walked in. "Hey," she said. Same tone. Same warmth. Nothing about her had changed in a way anyone else would notice. But I could see it now. The edges. The effort that used to sit underneath everything. Even when it wasn't there anymore. "You eating?" she asked. "I can," I said. She nodded. Turned back to the stove. Started moving through the same familiar rhythm. But slower. Not struggling. Just no longer rushing. That was the difference. I leaned against the counter. Watched her for a moment. Not analyzing. Just seeing. Every movement connected to something I now understood more fully. The repetition. The consistency. The quiet endurance that had shaped my entire childhood without me realizing it. After a few minutes, she said, "You don't have to stay." Not pushing me out. Just removing obligation. "I know," I said, and stayed anyway. She glanced at me. A small look, then nodded. That was acceptance. Not help. Of presence. We ate together. Same table. Same conversation patterns. Simple. Nothing about work. Nothing about money. Just ordinary things. And for the first time, I realized how much of that ordinariness had been built. Not accidental. Constructed. Maintained. Protected. After dinner, she stood up to clear the plates. Out of instinct. I stood up too. Took them before she could. She paused. Not arguing. Just watching. Then said, "You don't have to do that." There it was. The sentence. The one she had used my entire life. I smiled slightly. "I know," I said. Same answer. Different meaning now. She didn't push it. Didn't take the plates back. She just let me carry them. That was the moment I knew something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. She wasn't giving up control. She was allowing space. And that mattered more than anything she could have said. Because for someone like her, that was how acceptance looked. Not in words, in what she allowed to change. And as I stood there at the sink, washing dishes she had washed 1,000 times before, I realized something clearly. This wasn't about paying her back. That's not how it works. You don't repay something like that. You don't balance it. You don't make it equal. What you do is recognize it, and then decide what you're going to do with that recognition. For me, the decision was simple. She was never going to carry that kind of weight again. Not while I had any say in it. And I wasn't going to tell her that, because she wouldn't accept it if I framed it that way. I was just going to do it the same way she had. Quietly, completely, without making it something she had to respond to. And as I turned off the water, dried my hands, and looked back at her sitting at the table, I understood something I hadn't before. She had spent years making sure I never felt the full cost of her life. Now it was my turn to make sure she never had to feel it again. Not as a gesture, as a decision, one I was going to keep. What changed after that was not dramatic. That matters, because if I tell it honestly, the easy version would be wrong. The easy version is that I sat my mother down, told her what I had learned, and promised she would never struggle again. That never happened. She would have hated that version, not because it was loving, because it turned her life into a speech. And that was never how she lived. So I didn't make a moment out of it. I made a decision. Then I kept it. That was the whole thing. Not one conversation. A pattern. A bill handled before she had to think about it. A repair finished before it became a problem. A car issue solved quietly. A payment made in a way that didn't feel like rescue. That part took thought. More than money. Because helping someone like my mother is not just about what you provide. It is about how you provide it. She had spent her whole life protecting dignity in a room. I was not going to take that from her while trying to honor her. So I learned her rhythms even more carefully than before. Which things she would accept if framed as practical. Which things she would resist if they sounded too generous. Which expenses she would delay out of habit. Which ones she would pretend were fine for another month. I stopped letting those delays become real. If the house needed something, it got done. Not after discussion. Before it became one. If she mentioned a noise in the car, I handled it that week. Not eventually. That week. If she said, "It can wait," I heard what that sentence actually meant. It had probably already waited too long. That became our quiet negotiation. She minimized. I adjusted. She still said, "You don't need to do that." And I still answered some version of, "I know." That answer did a lot of work. It let her keep the sentence. And let me keep the action. Over time, that balance became natural. Not easy. Natural. There's a difference. Easy means no resistance. Natural means you understand the resistance and work with it anyway. A few months after the retirement party, I took her to lunch. Nothing formal. Just a Wednesday. Middle of the week. Around 1:15. A place she liked because the portions were too big and the staff remembered people. She ordered the same thing she always ordered. Half sandwich. Soup. Water with lemon. Same routine. Same small adjustments. When the check came, she reached for it automatically. Not performative. Automatic. I got there first. She looked at me once and said, "You always do that too quickly." I smiled. "Then you should stop reaching so fast." She almost smiled back. Almost. That was enough. We sat a little longer after lunch. No hurry to leave. People moved around us. Plates cleared. Chairs shifted. And she said something small that stayed with me. "You've been checking on me more." Not suspicious. Not even surprised. Just observant. I could have said a lot there. Could have told her why. Could have told her what I found out and how it rearranged something in me. I didn't. I said, "I should have done it sooner." She looked at me. Really looked. Then shook her head slightly. "No. You have your life." That was a reflex. Always to reduce her own claim on anything. Time. Money. Attention. I understood that better now, too. It wasn't just modesty. It was training. Years of making sure her needs stayed small enough to carry. Years of making room by taking up less of it. I leaned back in my chair and said, "I know I do." Then, after a second, "That's not the point." She didn't answer right away. Just looked down at her hands. Then she nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. That was enough. As the months went on, the practical changes added up. Not in a way she would ever have listed, but in a way I could see. She rested more. Not because she suddenly became someone who knew how, because there was finally room. She still woke up early, still moved through mornings like there was always one more thing to handle. But the urgency had changed. There was less edge in it, less invisible math happening behind every decision. That was what I wanted for her. Not luxury, not some dramatic reversal, just the removal of constant calculation, the quiet relief of not having to solve everything alone. I think that is what people misunderstand about sacrifice. They imagine grand gestures, big visible suffering. Most of it is not like that. Most of it is repetition, small denials, quiet decisions made so often they stop looking like decisions. That was my mother's life. Not one heroic moment. Thousands of ordinary ones. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't go back to admiring her in the old, smaller way. Before, I thought of her as hardworking. After that night, that word felt incomplete. Hardworking can describe anybody who stays busy. That was not her. She was strategic, protective, disciplined in a way that bordered on invisible. She had not simply worked hard. She had designed our childhood so that her struggle would not become our atmosphere. That is something else entirely. One evening, maybe 8 months after the retirement party, I was at her house helping move a chair from one room to another. No reason that mattered. She wanted it near the window instead. We set it down. She stepped back to look at it, then sat for a second to test the position. Hands folded in her lap. Late afternoon, light coming through the curtains. She looked smaller to me in that moment than she ever had when I was growing up. Not weaker, just older. And that hit me harder than anything I had learned at the party. Because the years she had hidden from me were already over. The cost had already been paid. What remained now was not admiration. It was responsibility. Not forced. Chosen. I asked if she wanted tea. She said yes. I made it the way she liked it. Not strong. Just enough. Brought it to her and set it down beside the chair. She said, "Thank you." Simple. Ordinary. But the room felt full of things neither of us was going to say. About years. About effort. About what I knew now. And I realized that was all right. Maybe more than all right. Not every truth needs to become dialogue to change a life. Sometimes seeing it is enough. Then acting from what you saw. That was what I had finally learned from her. She had spent years loving through action, not announcement. Without meaning to, she taught me the only way she would ever allow me to love her back. The same way. Quietly. Reliably. Without performance. So that is what I did. And what I still do. She never fully accepts how much I take care of. I don't think she ever will. Old habits don't disappear just because circumstances change. And some forms of dignity are too deeply built to be argued with. So I let her keep them. I let her insist on small things. I let her frame certain help as unnecessary. And then I do what needs to be done anyway. Gently, without making her defend herself. That is our balance now. Not perfect, real. And when I think back to that retirement party, to that woman walking up to me in a crowded room and casually handing me a truth I had somehow missed for decades, I don't feel guilt first. I feel clarity, because I understand my mother differently now. Not as someone who somehow managed, as someone who absorbed more than anyone around her ever knew and refused to let it darken our lives. Some sacrifices are made in complete silence by people who never want credit for them. That was her. I see that now. Completely. Or as completely as a son ever can. If you've ever found out late what someone quietly carried for you, stay with me. Subscribe. There's more where this came from. And tell me this in the comments. Who in your life did more for you than you understood at the time? Because sometimes love does not announce itself. It just keeps the lights on, keeps food on the table, keeps panic out of the room. And by the time you finally see it clearly, it has already shaped your whole life. There's another story I'll tell soon. It begins with one sentence at a retirement party that should have sounded ordinary. It didn't.